The idea that children should be seen and not heard, it makes sense for some time like 50 years ago or so. I'll use a time frame like that. About 20 years more so than my current age, because these things all seem to be happening before my time, but then sort of permeating my time as well. You see, back when communication was rare, when it was basically just I have mail or I don't see you except for, on Sundays or what have you, it would make sense that whatever form of communication, the content was important. Now, to say that children don't have anything important to say is, I think, folly. But it may have more to do with volume of content and not so much about who it's coming from. Children have a lot of volume, though. You're likely to hear more come from a child than you would any adult. Although maybe not so much somebody like myself, who has never shut up most of their life, was called a motor mouth as a child, and also heard the children should be seen, not heard mantra of, people of my former generation. So, what brought this about was actually the idea of piracy. What is known as piracy, downloading things that you don't own or what have you. And I'm reminded of back about 10 or so years ago when I was out of high school and I was living with my grandmother, and I would get on the internet whenever I could, and this was with your phone line. So you didn't have broadband internet, you had dial-up. And it was slow. It was super slow. So downloading anything not only took forever, but what you downloaded wasn't really that great quality either, because it couldn't be. You just didn't have the capacity to download these things at any good rate. A friend of mine had his own phone line, and he was able to use that phone 24/7. Now, he was rarely ever the type of person to use it to call people. He didn't even like getting calls, and when he got a pager from his parents, he actually found it to be more of a burden than it was anything else. And again, to those who don't know what a pager is, all it is just a receiver that says you got a phone call and it tells you the number, and then you have to go find a phone and call that person back whenever you can. I believe doctors still use pagers because they need to be able to be accessed without necessarily contacting people immediately. Well, I'm sure back 50 years ago, or even, 50 years ago is good because that's the 60s. Close to 70s. People had phones in their houses. Let's go into the 70s, when people really did start having phones, and having your own phone became like a big thing. That would be seen as frivolous, having your own phone. Like, why would any child need a phone of their own? That makes no sense. First of all, they're to be seen, not heard, so they should have no reason to be heard by other people, especially isolated from the family. And they don't get phone calls anyway, so, if they're going to get a phone call, why wouldn't they get one on the family phone? Privacy and all sorts of other things. That's not the point, though. The point is this idea that children are supposed to be seen, not heard, and then now they're able to be heard without being seen. So you then have this, it's very much, I would say, cognitive dissonance in physical form. Well, let's fast forward it a little bit more so and think about somebody right now. Most households will have one internet account, unless it's got like a business account associated with it, but they'll have one home internet account and everybody can share it, and that seems reasonable, right? Well, it would seem ridiculous for anybody in that house to have their own internet access. But as any of us know, when we're sharing internet, it tends to decline in quality and speed, especially if a lot of people in the household are doing various things, watching TV shows, recording things, what have you, uploading videos, or if your internet isn't that great on its own. And here in America especially, we don't have the greatest internet unless you happen to be in an area where that's being serviced by Google Fiber, and now all of a sudden all the competitors are able to somehow compete when they weren't able to beforehand. That's funny, isn't it? So having your own internet line, your own dedicated internet to your room would seem frivolous. It would seem pointless. But let's look back. It used to be a thing. That used to be really common. And now, well, with regards to the phone line, of course. But now, almost everybody has their own phone number. Things that were frivolous in the past, that seemed pointless, are now virtually a necessity. Parents want to know that they can communicate with their child immediately, because now they can. They have the ability to communicate and find out where their kid is, if their kid's all right, whatever, or just maintain a healthy relationship. This is something that I've found is a rare perspective when it comes to phones. Most people when it comes to technology feel that the technology, well, maybe not most, maybe just the vocal minority that I happen to hear on the internet. It's funny, the people on the internet are more afraid of the internet than the people who use it on a regular basis. The average person doesn't bitch and moan about internet privacy, about NSA. They complain about, work and the stresses of their day. I talk to them every day. I talk to people, and this is what I hear. The average person, people who don't spend time being on the internet. There are people who, have been able to find a nice medium, who can spend time on the internet, communicating with people on the internet, but also having a life outside of it as well. And so I think that as much as people think that they know what's best for others, they really don't. They don't know what's best for you or for me, to say that children should be seen and not heard, well, that gives them no voice. And unless that child wants to have a voice, they might listen.